Senate Intel Committee Chair Tom Cotton served in Afghanistan, Chairman of Armed Services, and joins us now. Senator, what should we take away from this, knowing as we hope this National Guardsman survives? How do we stop the next attack?
Well, first, Brian, let me extend my condolences to the families and the loved ones and the battle buddies of the two National Guard soldiers who were attacked viciously last week on the streets of Washington. I think clearly vetting standards for every person who's been admitted in the country, especially from countries of concern like Afghanistan, need to be revisited. When our military and our CIA goes around the world, they work with unsavory characters. It's a necessary part of the job. And they engage in some vetting of those characters. But that's very different from the standards that we would apply to vet someone to come to this country, to live in our communities, to have a family, and to ultimately become American citizens. And that's what the Biden administration got so wrong. First off, they just allowed Afghanistan to collapse, even though the warning signs were there in 2021. And then they rushed thousands and thousands of Afghan nationals into our country without applying those heightened standards. That's one reason I fought for years against the Biden administration effort to give immediate paths to citizenship to all of these people. And as you just heard Secretary Noem say, the administration is going to go back and revisit all of these cases to make sure that we don't have more such heinous attacks like the one that we saw last week in Washington.
And Senator, I don't have to tell you, the problem is in 2023, this guy's showing signs. His kids are coming to school hungry, all dirty. They find out that he's depressed, but there's no sense of closing the circle to make sure that person gets the help they need in maybe this case, or gets refused asylum when they applied for it in April. Meanwhile, I want you to hear how Democrats are handling it.
This is a desperate attempt of the Trump administration to blame everybody else in the world and not accept any accountability. In this case, there's no evidence that there was something that escaped the vetting.
They're going to blame Joe Biden on everything. I mean, it is almost getting comical, at this point.
Don't say that all Afghans in the United States, those who served with our military and who lost their lives and their health and their families in many ways by doing so, don't say that they're all bad.
Your thoughts about their take, as if you can't say enough about the way we left Afghanistan.
Well, again, the way we left Afghanistan was disgraceful, and Joe Biden's administration is to blame for that. They're also to blame for the efforts to try to cover up some of the consequences of that by rushing thousands of improperly vetted Afghans into our country. Again, the standards that the CIA or the military applies to work with folks in their own countries is very different from the standards we should apply to bring them to this country. And Brian, as you mentioned, some of the warning signs were there with this vicious murderer here in the United States. Kids going to school hungry and dirty. Putting aside the threat of violence, we should never admit anyone to this country if they don't have the means to provide for themselves, if they're going to be a drain on public resources. Just another example of failed immigration vetting standards that have gone back years the Trump administration is working so hard to correct and improve.
There's nothing wrong with the country deciding who gets to come. You have to improve the country. And for the most part, when people get here. So I want to talk about Venezuela. This is emerging from the Miami Herald, and the story is also on the front page of the New York Post. Donald Trump told Maduro, the leader of Venezuela, he and his family would be allowed safe passage from Venezuela, but gave him an ultimatum. You got to leave. Word is Turkey might be his last landing spot. Maduro says, I want to remain in power, and he also wants immunity from any crimes. The president said no and no. Your thoughts?
Well, Maduro is the illegitimate leader of Venezuela. There was an election last year. Maduro lost it once again. He has not been recognized as the legitimate leader of Venezuela for years by both the first Trump term and the Biden administration, and now President Trump once again. There's a long history of transitions from dictatorship to electoral democracies in Latin America when the strong man does leave the country. I would say Maduro needs to go for this country to be safe from the drug cartels that have infiltrated that his illegitimate government, and that are continuing to try to run drugs into our country. Fortunately, not nearly as much anymore since the Trump administration is taking that threat seriously. But as long as Nicolas Maduro is in power in Venezuela, you're going to continue to see the risk not only of violence in Latin America, but the drugs that I've heard so much about from Arkansas sheriffs and police chiefs that are threatening our communities and that are killing our kids. Nicolas Maduro needs to go. That's what President Trump has made clear. I think that's probably what he told him last week on the phone. I'm sure that the Cuban intelligence services in Venezuela and Russian generals are urging him to stay. But if he knows what's good for him, like so many other Latin American strongmen over the years, I think that it's time for him to go.
So Carlos Jimenez, a congressman from Miami, said he'll be out by Christmas. Does Senator Tom Cotton think so too?
Well, I wouldn't necessarily put a time on it, but it would certainly be a wonderful Christmas gift, not just for the people of Venezuela, but for Arkansas families who have been threatened by drugs run by cartels out of Venezuela for so long.
So I want to talk about where Steve Witkoff's heading off to Moscow to continue to see if Vladimir Putin has any interest at all in ending this war, where he's lost about 1 million of his soldiers, and every day he's losing more of his Navy to a country that doesn't have one, but they have underwater drones. So what should Witkoff's focus be when he talks to Vladimir Putin? What would actually get his attention? Senator, if I put you in that room, he's going to be there with Jared Kushner.
Well, Secretary Rubio said the meetings in Miami with Ukrainians yesterday were productive. He said the main focus, as it should be, is not just ending the fighting, but making sure the fighting doesn't renew in the future. Vladimir Putin is solely responsible for this unprovoked war of aggression, just as he was in 2014 when he invaded Ukraine the first time on Barack Obama's watch. So the key points, I think, for Ukraine is that they remain defensible territorial lines, geography matters here, and a military that can deter Russian aggression in the future, no matter who is the president of the United States or Ukraine or Russia. I think that's what the focus of Mr. Witkoff should be as he goes to Russia, and he should make it clear that President Trump means business. We're continuing to arm Ukraine through NATO. We've imposed sanctions on 2 major Russian oil companies. President Trump has called for Congress to pass a new sanctions bill. The pressure will continue to increase on Vladimir Putin. He will have more to lose on the battlefield and in his economy than if he comes to the negotiating table now to end this war that he started.
All right, a lot of balls in the air, a lot of consequences. Senator Tom Cotton, thanks so much for sharing your points of view. Appreciate it this morning.